Good morning. I'm Catherine Bertini. I'm a distinguished fellow for global food and agriculture at the Chicago Council on Global Affairs. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this year's Global Food Security Symposium. Just a reminder that the Council is a nonprofit, independent, and nonpartisan platform. Views here expressed are by individuals and do not represent the institutional position of the Council. Last year, we saw a historic and first ever UN Food Systems Summit where global leaders recognized the interconnectivity and the importance of food systems transforming the world. But since then, we've seen the food needs almost blow up over issues like climate change, COVID-19, and the infrastructural problems that cause, rising inequality, conflict, and then unprecedented levels of disruption, including the Russian war in Ukraine. So we've really seen now high fuel prices, high food prices, sometimes already food that's unavailable to those people who spend most of their incomes on food. And there's much to do for the global community and in each government around the world to try to solve this problem and ensure that millions more people do not starve. The World Food Program says that there are 49 million people in 43 countries who are already at the brink of famine and that number is growing. So what do we do? What do we do? How do we take advantage of the food that exists already? How do we grow more food? How do we reach these people that are so much in need? So we're at a major inflection point, and we're really counting on leadership from people around the world, and especially from the United States government. We're very fortunate today that we have with us Ambassador Cindy Mccain, who can talk to us about some of these issues and about how the U.S. may be trying to deal with them. As I know, our listeners know, Ambassador Mccain is a diplomat, she's a businesswoman, she's a humanitarian long before she became the ambassador in Rome. She's the former chair of the board of trustees of the Mccain Institute for International Leadership at Arizona State University, where she oversaw the organization's focus on advancing character-driven global leadership based on security, economic opportunity, freedom, and human dignity. She was for many years on the board of Project Cure, and she's also been in the private sector, having been chairman of her family's business, Hensley Beverage Company. She earned an undergraduate degree in education and a master's in special education from the University of Southern California. She's already made her mark in Rome, only having been there a short period of time. She has a great deal of respect for all the other delegates and certainly with the agencies to which she represents the United States. So, Ambassador, it's a real thrill to welcome you here today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. We know that Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has been very involved in looking at issues about how this food crisis can be averted. And he's talked to many governments and international institutions to ask them to take action on this matter. Can you give us a sense of some of the things the U.S. is doing to lead on global food security?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, thank you for having me. And this issue is such an important issue. It's always been around, food insecurity and food security, but now, of course, it's heightened to front and center because of the war in Ukraine. The United States, as always, is leading on this effort. We're the largest donors to the World Food Program. We're also one of the largest donor to FAO. These are both UN agencies that deal directly with food security issues and food in general. EFAD and some of the others do the same thing. What we're succinctly doing right now is making sure that we can help WFP get their job done in a better, quicker, more efficient manner, and also by rallying the world on these issues. The United States is always the first one there in any of these crises, but we're encouraging some of our world counterparts to do the same thing now. This is an unprecedented, unwarranted war that has occurred. as a result of the Russian invasion. And as we all know in the arena here, Ukraine was the breadbasket to not only Europe, but to most of the world's vulnerable populations. So there's many things that the United States is doing, but those are two highlights: funding, of course, and helping others do their jobs better and make sure we can get this done. People are going to starve as a result of this. People are going to starve, and we're on the brink of famine in several parts of the world right now. So this is a time that is not only critical for the United States as being a donor and an activist in this area, but the world is on the brink now too because of the food insecurity.
Yes. The U.S. has been a leader in the past, but it's not often at the level of the Secretary of State. So,
Right.
So hopefully his involvement is going to really make more of a difference.
It also tells you that the president is focused on this as well, and it takes all of us to be able to do these things. And I'm grateful that both Secretary Blinken and, of course, the president have not only heightened this issue, but are active in it now and are making sure that things are getting done. So we're grateful for all this involvement, and certainly our ambassador in New York.
Yes, and I noticed. In fact, I attended a side event that she and the Secretary of State decided that when the U.S. was president of the Security Council, that food security would be their theme for that month, which is really important.
Yes, we just completed a ministerial a couple of weeks ago now that was dealing specifically with this issue, and so we're very grateful. Those of us that kind of work out in the field with all this stuff, we're very grateful for not only their involvement but their continued involvement in this.
Yeah, right. Great. I'm glad you think Rome is the field for New York. But I know you also mean that you go all over the place yourself. You've been traveling already in that job. Well, one of the issues about food shortages are export bans and export restrictions. And we've seen some countries already who have cut off their exports of cereals, for instance. And we know from the last round, at 2008 to 2011, when there was a food price crisis, that's a really bad thing to do. Because not only does it cut off the access to that food from the people in the countries to which it was being exported, but it also even hurts the suppliers in country because they can't sell their goods. So how can we do something about that, or what can we do?
You raise a really good point here. We have to begin by encouraging countries not to ban exports and making sure that people not only realize what's going on and the effect that this could have on the world, but also, as you said, certainly within their borders of the country. Export bans are not going to help anything in this, because we together as a world need to help feed everybody. And banning foods or hoarding foods or whatever, however you want to put it, is not the answer to this at all. At all. The answer is that right now is that the Russians need to pull out of Ukraine. That's the answer to this.
That would help immensely for many things, but certainly food. Even there's issues about getting food out of Ukraine that's already been harvested.
Yeah, it's very difficult, as you know. I mean, there's no corridors, there's no safe zones, there's none of that kind of stuff, and of course the ports are mined, and so it's a cascading issue that's affecting everything now. And unfortunately, I was most recently in Kenya and Madagascar, and the effect on those two countries alone, combined with climate change, there's some serious things happening there. And people, as I said, people are not only going to starve, but this is going to affect generations if we don't get a handle on it. Excuse me.
Yes, it certainly will. I attended a briefing recently of WFP Latin America, and they were talking about how this impacts even Latin America. But people would normally think of the countries near the Black Sea or other, but as far away as Latin America, there's big impact.
Yes. Well, as you know, the Central American countries have been hit very hard with climate change. And so that, again, compounded with a lack of food substance to come in, or a lack of seeds in many cases, or a lack of the ability, oil, the other issues are oil. It's affecting everybody. As I said, it's a cascading chain of events that are it's harming the entire planet. And unfortunately, I don't think that it's going to end anytime soon. I wish, but the ability to be able, you also mentioned the ability to get the grain out that's already been harvested has been tragic. I mean, we're almost past the point of no return now on some of it. So there's been a lot of different thoughts and how we do it and all that. And I leave that to the WFP experts and others. But the point is, we need to get the grain out. We need to get it out.
Right. And I'm sure this potential of violence, I mean, beyond the outrageous war, the potential for violence is a concern also of the international community, and certainly the U.S. Again, based on what we saw the last time, when people don't have food, or it's so expensive they can't buy it.
Right. Well, anytime there's food insecurity, the existence or the possible existence of violence is right on its heels. And we're seeing that effect to a great degree around the world now. So the importance of making sure that not only can we get some of the grain out, but secondly, encouraging like U.S. farmers and other farmers around the world to grow more if possible, to grow more with less, which is the things we're working on at FAO in terms of how we can grow better crops with less water, less space, kind of thing. It's also unless we can work together, and I keep harping on this a little bit when I'm in some of these groups and some of the other things about working together as a globe. I realize sometimes it's a pipe dream because people don't always work well together, but we need to. This is something that affects all of us, and so growing more. Not putting export bans in place, and of course paying close attention to climate change is something else, and that's the big issue right now in terms of being able to have a future as well.
Right. Well, that was an answer to a question I wanted to ask you about medium term and long term too, because funding WFP and FAO now is very important. And the social safety net is critical, or just food to vulnerable people is critical, but somehow we have to get to the point where when we have a crisis that is created that it potentially impacts a lot of people, we don't have to rush to do that because there are better systems in place. Right,
better systems in place. Sure, you are exactly right. And we've talked about there's a lot of great ideas out there, and there's a lot of really smart people who are working on this. But unless we work together, we're not going to have much in the way of real of the ability. Anyway, I guess what I'm trying to say is, unless we work together, we're not going to be able to do this. And in the case of small farmers, let's say in Africa, things like that, where they need seeds, they need a little help, but it's on a small basis because it feeds their family. That's what we're going to lose in a lot of this, or the small, subsistence farming and farming that really, really supports a community or a village. And the war, combined with everything else that I've mentioned, is really, it's again a cascading effect that's damaging everything.
Yes. Now, the Food Systems Summit made a bunch of recommendations. Of course, FAO has been working for years on being in a position to be able to help countries, particularly in the South. But we still have to figure out a way to make this all happen. And I'm not sure anybody has the magic wand yet for what to do.
I think you're right on that. There's a lot of things that could be done, can be done, but will they be done? Who knows at this point? But I do know that organizations like WFP and our FAO and our EFADs and all of our other organizations that work on just these issues are working very hard, and because we're in a hurry now. We need to be in a hurry to figure out how we can fix this, and not just the existence of the war in terms of what the damage it's caused, but in general. I mean, this is a long-term problem that was coming down the road anyway, and now it's been catapulted. So, less water, less land, all the things we talk about. I encourage our folks to think outside the box at the embassy. Just think outside the box. As weird as it may sound, let's talk about it, because we might be able to at least pass it on or work with it in some way. It's a very exciting arena to be working in, and I don't mean that in a war way. I wouldn't want people to misconstrue that, but this has direct effect on the planet. And so for those of us that work in it now, it's very exciting to be a part of that perhaps we might have a little existence of success if we work hard.
I sure hope so. And together we can do that. And there's a meeting coming up. The G7 is going to be at the end of the month. And Germany has over the last few years exhibited a lot of leadership in this area. And certainly we're hopeful that they will at the G7. What would you hope that might be achieved at the G7?
Well, a global perspective that we need to work on this together, obviously. I mean, the things that I've mentioned throughout this discussion today. But I'd like to see, the encouragement, not just the U.S. saying we need more help from everybody, but other countries saying we need more help from everybody. And we work very closely with Germany, certainly in Rome we do, and I know in other arenas. And I'm just hoping that we can figure something out. I mean, we have a real hellstorm coming at us, and we're going to have to, otherwise, as I said, not just famine, but with those things comes violence, as you mentioned, comes other problems. So to have a stable world and happy children, we're going to have to figure out how to feed everyone, and it's not going to be easy.
No, it's not. When President Obama was president during the last crisis, the G7 in Italy actually came up with a list of pledges that governments were going to undertake.
Right. Yeah.
So let's hope they do something like that again.
Hope so.
Going beyond money, right? I mean, as you said several times, how can we build coalitions? How can we work together? Right. How can we think outside the box? Those are all important parts.
All of them, very important, very important. What I've also seen a little bit of is the use of water as almost a weapon. The inability to gain access to not just clean water, but water in general. And so water is another issue that we work on very, very, very deeply within our embassy and others too, I know. Because the water, I come from a state where I tell everybody, I'm joking, but it's the truth. We count every drop. We have to. We live in the desert. So I've always had a good appreciation for the lack of water and what it can do. And so that's what we're trying to work on very, very hard now and very closely with everyone to make sure that we can. I don't know how you solve a water issue unless everyone gets involved. So I think we'll see. But countries like Madagascar are devastated because there's no water. They have no access.
Well, that's a place where Arizona expertise and Israeli expertise and others who have found a way to make deserts work. Really helpful. Yeah.
No, you're exactly right.
Well, before I say thank you, do you have any other thoughts about how we can work together before we say goodbye?
Well, I think first of all, I appreciate the heightened discussion from you and from others within the United States. We're actually talking about this issue now. We're talking about the needs and what we can do. And if there's anything I'm sure of, the ingenuity of the United States can figure this out to some degree. So I think what we look at is obviously the future. Right now, we're faced with immediate needs, and then we have our long-term needs that we need to take a look at. So I want I guess if I had a wish, I would say I want everyone to stop and listen and read about this, or listen to people, the experts in the field, so that you can be helpful with us as well. It's going to take everybody. And so all I can do is encourage, and I'm happy to do that as much as I can, because we certainly need everyone's help in this.
Well, from our perspective in Chicago, we're very proud to have an ambassador who's got the experience and the commitment, the dedication as you. So thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mccain, for this insightful and important discussion. Up next, our panel will discuss how inclusive agricultural development can foster localized solutions to promote food and nutrition security. Thin Lei Win will moderate this discussion. Thank you, Thin, and thank you to our panelists for joining today.
Thanks very much for your comments, Catherine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2022 Global Food Security Symposium. My name is Thin Lei Win, and I'm a journalist specializing in food systems and climate change, including through my own newsletter, Thin Ink. And I'm delighted to be moderating this panel discussion today that is focusing on a key aspect of sustainable food systems, inclusivity. Now, for the past year or so, we've been discussing about how to transform our current food systems, which are unequal, unsustainable, and environmentally destructive. And today, we're going to be talking about how inclusive agricultural development is crucial to local solutions that are going to improve nutrition and stave off hunger. Now, for too long, international development assistance has been focusing on donor priorities rather than the needs of the communities in which they're supposed to serve. But there is a growing consensus and willingness to change this. For example, last year, USAID announced a new agency-wide focus on inclusive development and shared a draft policy on locally led capacity development. But time is of the essence because we are facing some existential challenges, a third major food crisis in 15 years, a climate crisis that is looming ahead, and increasing levels of hunger and malnutrition. So now is the time to bring everyone to the table and empower communities to drive solutions that work for them. So what kind of investments, infrastructure, and partnerships do we need? And how can we create more locally led, sustainable, and resilient food systems? Well, we have a stellar lineup of expert speakers to answer some of these questions today. So thank you all, especially to the council members and partners for joining us via YouTube for today's On the Record program. Now, as a reminder, the council is a non-profit, independent and non-partisan platform. So the views expressed by individuals we host are their own, and they do not represent institutional positions or views of the council. Let me now introduce you to our speakers. We have Sherry Atilano from the Philippines, who is a founding farmer, CEO, and president of Agricultural Systems International, Inc. Now, Sherry started teaching farmers at the age of 12, and she now has 22 years of wide-ranging experience in sustainable food systems. Through her company, Sherry is creating an economy that is zero hunger, zero waste, and zero insufficiency. We also have Enoch Chikava, who is the Interim Director of Agricultural Development at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, Enoch leads the foundation's work to reduce poverty for millions of farming families in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. He has some 3 decades of experience in agriculture, ranging from farmer organizations to the private sector and now philanthropy. And last, but definitely not the least, we have Asma Latif, who leads policy and advocacy at the SDG2 Advocacy Hub, which is an initiative to coordinate action to end hunger and malnutrition and achieve Sustainable Development Goal 2. Now, Asma has extensive experience in policy advocacy and coalition building, including through her previous work as director of Bread for the World Institute and interim executive director of the Alliance to End Hunger. Asma, Cherry, and Enoch, thank you for being with us here today. I know that it's particularly late in the Philippines, so special thanks to Cherry for staying up late to speak to us. Now, I want to start off with a question for all three of you, and it's something very topical. Has the war in Ukraine changed the debate around reforms to make development more inclusive? And if that's the case, how has that changed? Enoch, perhaps I can start with you.
Yes, indeed. The debate is shifting, but it is actually, I think, emphasizing in a more eloquent way that the global agriculture and food systems is very fragile. Things that take place in a particular region is, ripple effects into many other places. Obviously, the impact is very disproportionate. That's why it is very, very important, again, to look at those regions that are more vulnerable. If your economy depends on agriculture, which is the case for Sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, where your GDP up to almost 30% is driven by agriculture. And if 70% of your population are in the rural areas and they depend on agriculture, then also you realize that agriculture is the biggest employer. Take that scenario from Africa and then go to the other side. You go to Europe, you go to the US, these numbers are extremely different, where maybe 1% of the people are involved in actual agricultural production, where the contribution of agriculture to the economy is less than 5%. So you find that the debate is starting to focus on what needs to happen, but the actual activities of what to do is really, really important. And here I want just to highlight maybe two things. If it is going to be inclusive, it's not just about food production. It is about supporting rural livelihoods. So just more than just serving food, ship it around, feed hungry people. That's part of it. But the real debate is about, agriculture is the mainstay. It is a job for hundreds of millions of people. So how you respond, you need to focus more on the long-term inclusive development. The second thing is about really inclusive of women. You can just talk about inclusivity, you want to be proximate, but here we are talking about the role of women and who make about 60% of all the rural farm labor. So really, things are shifting. I participated in the first ministerial meeting, which is a part of the G7, and they established now the Global Alliance for Food Security, which is a much broader alliance than just the G7. And I hope there's now discussion about the short term, but more importantly, I'm pushing more for the long-term development of the agricultural sector, which is inclusive, particularly focusing on the vulnerable people, regions, including women.
Thanks so much. That's a great scene setter, particularly, talking about the fact that we need to think beyond food, not just about food production, but rural livelihoods. And of course, very, very important issues around gender. Asma, I want to come to you next, partly because of your experience in advocacy. How has this changed? You've been, advocating for these issues for a very long time now. Are you seeing this changing and shifting?
Yes. As you said in your setup, this is the third food price crisis in 15 years. And the Ukraine invasion comes on the heels of COVID-19 and the impact that COVID-19 has had. Since the goal to end hunger was adopted in 2014, there's been an uptick in hunger every year for the last 7 years or so. So what we're seeing now is a crisis upon crisis, and it is really reflecting, as Enoch said, that our food systems are really fragile, and they are not as currently functioning, able to deliver what we need them to deliver. So this is really, people say wake up call. We've been saying wake up call for year after year, but it really is coming to a point. The fact that our global food system is is dependent on two countries to deliver a massive amount of wheat, and those two countries are out of commission indefinitely. I think it raises lots of really important questions about our priorities, and I think there's a huge opportunity now to think through. I mean, the advantage of a crisis is it gets attention at the very highest levels. So we've got the world's attention. How do we use it? I think there's a really important moment right now to make the case that we absolutely, for long-term resilience, need to diversify production. And smallholder farmers, as Enoch was saying, are key to that. They are, through the COVID crisis, they were the ones feeding, their local communities. They are critical to local and regional food security. So as we think about coming out of this crisis, how do we diversify production? And more importantly, given the high rates of malnutrition that we've been seeing and the potential impact of high food prices, low-income families spend a lot more of their income on food and nutrition. When prices get high, they tend to have to make choices, and oftentimes it's the nutritious foods that get left behind, or they begin to forego meals. And to Enoch's point, women and girls are the ones worst affected by those choices. They end up eating last, or they have to sell off assets to be able to continue to eat. That has long-term consequences. So, we're in a situation right now where, because of rising food prices and what this COVID-19 and now this crisis have illustrated about our food system, we can make some really important, from an advocacy perspective, case to really diversify both food production, diversify diets. And then, of course, with climate change, I think all of these issues will be coming to a head more frequently. So how do we also do all of this sustainably?
Thanks, Asma. I mean, Cherry, you essentially have been working with the small scale producers, right? Pretty much almost all your entire professional life. Are you seeing the change in this debate as well? I saw you nodding when both Enoch and Asma were speaking.
Thank you, Thin. I couldn't agree more, both to Enoch and Asma's comments, actually. Like, for example, the past month since the Ukraine, Russia war happened, of course, food prices increases and things, and even gasoline increases. It means supply chain is really affecting a lot. And coming from a country with 7,107 islands, and our food is coming from those further islands, and the people are concentrated in mega metro cities or metropolitan, it's really very expensive. So you have very high cost in production and you have high cost in your supply chain. But for the smallholder farmers, actually, it's really about shifting the conversation and investing to them more. And also discovering the fact that as Filipinos, for example, or in Asia, we eat a lot of rice, but we discover, because of the increase in price of wheat, that we actually eat a lot of bread. We consume a lot of wheat, both in food, as human beings, and in feeds. So there's a shift on discussion also on the other side, especially a lot of consultations happening now on the smallholder farmers. What would be our local replacement to flour? Instead of wheat flour, can we utilize and put more investments on cassava flour, on taro flour, on sweet potato flour? What are those replacements that actually smallholder farmers can benefit from in terms of investments? And how do we engage local R&D, like universities, my company, Agri, we actually had a MOA signing with 74 state universities and colleges in the Philippines, working on how do we do R&D, research and development, or research for development, in really including the farmers in the research right now. Because for the longest time, it's always like the research and the academe, and then the farmers will be the recipient and beneficiary if there's funding for the farmers to adopt. But now it's kind of shifting the conversation, because most of the time, the farmers, they have knowledge. The farmers have knowledge on what can grow. The farmers have knowledge that this is the kind of root crops we can replace in our food for the local economy. But at the same time, it's really about how do we progress technologies in making this crop successfully increase their production. How do we plow back more investments and infrastructure support for supply chain? But at the same time, how do we harness the potential of women? Because most of the time it's the women actually who are more equipped in terms of root crops production, but more importantly, they're more savvy in terms of access to finance. And lastly, of course, we're doing about climate change, right? It's been a battle, as Asma said. It's like every year we're like hoping. In the Philippines, we had volcanic eruption. Yesterday, another volcanic eruption actually, devastated part of our country, which is a basket for food production. And then, we had pandemic. We had this Asian swine flu for the livestock and poultry also. And then now the increase in prices, and triple the problem in malnutrition and hunger. So the shift right now is, how do we only not include the urban areas also, right? So there's also a shift of, if the rural area is so hard to improve infrastructure, and the supply chain is so expensive, how do we bring food nearer to the consumers? Because most of the people are concentrated in the metropolitan. So how do we shift that production from the rural area and bring it more near to the consumer? So those are the shifts that we're actually experiencing the past few months.
Very interesting, Sherry. And I want to keep you on the spotlight because I have a specific question for you for the second round of questions. One of you just now talked about how, there needs to be a shift in the conversation, right? But these calls for development to be human-centered, they're not new, right? They've been going for decades, and you've been part of this discussion for a long time. So I have a two-part question for you. One is, how successful has these calls and attempts have been? And number two, what else needs to be done to actually really make sure that, agriculture development is actually farmer-centered, in particular, small-scale producers?
I think it could really contribute positively in terms of, for 24 years observing it and growing up in the sector, actually. There's a dent of progress, but we have not yet there. There's so much work. We're just like scratching the surface. And in terms of that, actually, it's really kind of difficult on how, to maintain this human-centric kind of development, especially if there's no investment involved in the middle. And if there's like no collaboration between the public, private, and civil society organizations. But more so, I could see that a lot of progress are happening if there's an academe or the research institution being in the process. And another one, I observed before, it was always like top, bottom, right? Whatever the national decision makers would do, it will just go, and the adopters will just implement it. And it never worked. What works right now is bottom up and top to bottom, of course, meeting halfway. More collaborations actually have been happening, even especially from development funds. Asian Development Fund Bank is actually present in the Philippines, and you could see a lot of intervention coming from them on how they could fund a lot of, research in agriculture, infrastructure to better our agricultural system. But more importantly, to really like put a stake in the progress to transform our food systems in the country, and to create a roadmap on how do we really feed our growing population. And lastly, it's really about seeing how most of the research right now are happening more participatory. a lot of farmers are involved in the research. It's more consultative rather than here's the research, you implement it because you're the end user. It's more really like including the farmers, consulting the farmers. In my country, it's very common to call Agri Doctors. So now the Agri Doctors, these are like a trained agriculturist, but you are not only agriculturist that's expert on pests or production. You need to be expert in social work. You need to be expert in proposal making because there's no funding if you don't know how to do proposal making from the ground. And you need to be expert in financial literacy and support to farmers. So in that way, this Agri Doctors is actually one of the best way in making all of this change a more farmer-centric because there's more consultation involvement, more immersion with the farmers, and of course, even in the fishing communities. And at the same time, the voices from the ground are heard. But we're still scratching the ground. There's still so much to do, but sometimes the participatory approach is so difficult and very investment heavy. So we need to still put so much money on doing this work because it's not easy and it's more demanding in terms of time and resources.
Really great point, Sherry. Enoch, I want to bring you in now because you work for one of the leading philanthropic organizations in the world, and your organization is investing. One of the things that Sherry just now talked about was the need for investment and collaboration, and your organization is investing and supporting smallholder farmers. Tell us a bit more about the philanthropic community's role in working with local farmers and empowering local communities.
Thanks, Lynn. Maybe just picking up from Sherry and also from Asma, it is really maybe the biggest headwind that we have is climate change. So we need to really focus on how do you build resilience in the face of changing climate. So, as you know, the role of philanthropy is to do what others, and others I mean the government and private sector, what others can't or won't do. So it is very much to complement the work of the government and the work of the private sector and provide solutions where you don't have systems that are already working. And here I want to just give you a quick perspective that poor people are in the condition they are in because the current systems were never designed for them. Like the research and development system might not be really for the poor. It is maybe for those who are already participating in the market. And then look at the market systems. If you are not generating any surplus, there's no one from a marketing perspective that will see you as valuable. So philanthropists try to push the boundaries so that the systems will become more inclusive and then reach out to the people who are excluded today. And at the Gates Foundation, we place a huge premium on making the most of the investments by supporting inclusive partnerships, with the main aim to expand the options available for smallholder farmers. Because the fact that without pushing those boundaries, we are going to be seeing R&D just focused on the core staples. It will be the usual suspect. It's going to be corn. It is going to be rice. It is going to be wheat. And then just a few other crops. So we need to be pushing the boundaries in order to diversify production in line with the diets in the communities. And you find that now, so when you begin to do that, you need to choose your partners carefully, but also making sure that you have metrics of measuring whether they're doing a good job or not. So here we have an array of partners from the global partners, national partners, as well as local partners. I would say at the global level, we work with a consortia of research, public research organizations called the CGIAR. I'm sure you know 15 of them. And the reason why it's important that they're successful, because they're the only global organization whose main outputs are to help smallholder farmers. Everything they do, if they do it well, it's meant to be helping smallholder farmers. But also, as you begin to work on that, you have different needs for the different regions. I'll give you a quick example here. The products that you want to develop, let's say the crop varieties for the Eastern Highlands in East Africa will be different from the products in the Sahel region in West Africa. So you need to be finding organizations that have the tentacles that will reach out to be identifying the targeted product profiles. As you're working on these profiles, it may be the same cassava, but the cassava in West Africa is different from the cassava in East Africa. Because in East Africa, you have a disease called the mosaic, disease that can wipe out the whole crop. In West Africa, it hasn't reached yet. So you find that your targeted product profiles have to be appropriate for that particular region. So at global level, we work with the CG system, and they are working on crop varieties, which are more than 25 in total. We work on some of the really so-called minor crops. When you look at the market aspect, sorghum, millet, yam, cassava, sweet potato. But you find that these crops are staples in particular regions. And then we need to be improving their productivity by making sure that there is a research and development to be improving to make sure that they are more adaptable to the climate changing, like your high temperatures, new diseases which are coming because of the climate change. The second group, which is at the national level, we are working with the governments to make sure that they prioritize agriculture, not just by speaking in a public rally, but making sure that it is part of their plan. And they have accountability mechanisms, not to the donors, but they need to be accountable to their own citizenry and say, we care about agriculture. This is what you're going to be doing in the next 5 years. So we call them the National Agricultural Investment Plans. And they have to be informed by evidence that will then inform them if they pick up a particular value chain, what is the impact on the economy of that country? So we provide them with the tools to make sure that they can prioritize their policies using data and evidence. And then, of course, at local level, we also work with other organizations, like the AGRA, which is working below them as an alliance of other 400, local partners, from SMEs that are involved in the agro dealership, delivery of the inputs, but also with farmers organizations that will give us feedback whether some of the products are really helping them drive productivity and income. Maybe the last thing is we are also looking at a lot of the data and evidence at country level. And there we are working with organizations like FAO in an initiative that we call the 50 by 2030, which is a 10-year effort to ensure 50 low and medium income countries can produce, analyze, interpret, and apply data for the decisions within the ag sector. Understanding what is the yield, and then what are the diseases at local level. Only then can you begin to use this data across the whole ecosystem, which will be important for those who are doing R&D, important for the policymakers, important also even for the local agro dealers and SMEs. So we work right through the whole chain, and we can't be successful if our partners are not proximate and they're not giving us sufficient evidence in terms of whether these investments are making any change or not.
Thanks so much. That's a very comprehensive answer and almost like a roadmap, I think, for lots of other philanthropic actors who want to get involved in inclusive agricultural development. Asma, I want to turn to you next because, the SDG 2 Hub has been central in drafting this new consensus to prioritize small-scale producers. Can you, based on your long, extensive experience, can you tell us what are some of the challenges that you and the wider advocacy community face when it comes to making sure that the needs of these small-scale producers are included in policies and programs?
So thanks, Then. I think since the first food price crisis of this century, in 2008, there was a big push. I think there was a huge recognition that we needed to focus again on agriculture and smallholder agriculture. And that effort has been underway. And we have, obviously, we produce enough food in the world today to meet the world's population, which is terrific. It's really a question of distribution. And as I said earlier, we've seen a rise in hunger over the last several years. Smallholder farmers are amongst the population that is seeing a rise in food insecurity themselves. So this the consensus really came out of this sense of urgency that somehow smallholder farmers are getting lost in some of these bigger conversations. I think there is a debate in some circles, particularly when the focus is on food production and yields. There's a debate about, where to put the investment to get the biggest yield. And, would smallholder farmers necessarily deliver the kind of yield that is needed? But as Enoch said in his first answer, we need to be thinking not just about yield, but as we need to be thinking about livelihoods, we need to be thinking about nutrition, we need to be thinking about resilience and sustainability. And I think there is growing recognition of this, and there's huge opportunities to scale up investment in smallholder farmers. And one of the consensus really points to new research and data that Series 2030 brought forward about impactful interventions, the interventions where you could get the biggest increase in livelihoods and productivity in smallholder farmers, that based on 30 years of research. So we know a lot of what to do. The real issue is, really having that clarity of focus that we do have multiple outcomes that we're trying to achieve, and that smallholder farmers are really at the forefront of all of those outcomes, and making that case very effectively to policymakers who, at this, both, in many countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, the COVID crisis has really put a lot of pressure on budgets. So the fiscal space to respond is tight. And I think we need really a common approach amongst donors, amongst governments, about prioritizing smallholder farmers over the next 8 years. Otherwise, we will definitely leave ourselves vulnerable to further crises like this, and they will continue to get left behind. So, it is harder work. I think, as Sherry and Enoch said, you do need to really understand the specific challenges. Agriculture is context specific. Even regions within a country have very different conditions, and the farmers who are in those. So recognizing, that engagement means we need to be much more patient. And we need to build in metrics of accountability and metrics of that show that we're making progress, that build in some of that patience. We're not going to get the same kind of the quick results we're used to, but that's okay if the longer term, if at the end we are achieving a much more diversified production and diets and building that resilience. In responding to this crisis, I think we really need to be thinking about immediate needs. So humanitarian assistance and social protection. But I think it's also an opportunity to lay the groundwork for medium and long term. And as we respond to this crisis, I think that there is an opportunity to do all three and put smallholders at the center.
Thanks so much again for emphasizing this very important point around food availability versus access and affordability, right? It's usually the latter that is the issue, and also the different dimensions of food security. It's not just yield, but also nutrition and livelihoods that also play a really important role. I mean, great insights. I have so many more questions, and we could keep this conversation going on forever, but we do have a few questions from the audience that I really want to get through, because we are actually running a bit longer than I anticipated. And I just want to go through a few of those questions. There's one that I thought was really interesting, that asked, what is missing from the mainstream conversation about transforming agriculture development for food security? So what's not being discussed? What needs to be included? Is there anything from all the meetings and discussions that you've been sitting in where people are not really talking about a certain topic or some issues that you think should really be discussed? Who wants to go first? I'm going to be democratic and open up. Cherry.
I think then there's so much have been discussed and so much consultations happen. It's really about clarity on who will put the first take, right? I was actually, admiring what Enoch roadmap on their investments, because those are very intentional investments that are really putting where, we need to walk our talk. Right. So there's so much talk, but there's like a problem on implementation, a problem on where the funding is coming. I think in the UN food systems discussion since early, May 2020 or June 2020, there's enough issues have been laid out. There are also a lot of solutions have been provided, but the step forward is the hardest. Who will pay for the solutions to be implemented? And I think another one is we need to give more emphasis on the youth, the power of youth in harnessing agriculture, because it seems the youth have been invited for so long, but it's like mostly on advocacy. But if you see the world, or especially in developing countries, the population is young, and they can actually have the power to convert and transform our consumerism patterns. If the youth will decide that we will consume what is healthy for our body, it will answer the concerns of asthma. And another one, what is healthy for our environment? What is healthy for the planet? If that mass of consumerism that is powered by the youth will be supported, will be engaged more, as instead of just amplifying their voices. But we need to put more investment, more push and policies about adolescents' consumption to healthier food options. I think if you give emphasis to that, it can be a big policy. Another one, I think, is what's been effective in my work is really making a concrete consolidation of smallholder farmers so that they can reach economies of scale. And once they're consolidated, and it is in a country level policy, it's also encouraging the private sector to really be engaged in providing commitments on market linkage, especially in sourcing locally. Because the problem right now, most countries are importing so much because, of course, private sector is cheaper to import these goods than investing in local production. If there's a strong commitment from the private sector to source locally, then we are talking that the smallholder farmers will definitely produce what is decent and what is required. Yeah.
Asma, Enoch, would you like to add anything to what's missing from the mainstream conversations?
Can I just pick up on Sherry's last point around organizing smallholders? I think there's so much evidence, and it's one of the main findings of Series 2030 that farmers who are part of farmer organizations tend to do much better. And so there is a lot, I think, as we think about investment in the future, it really is, how do we support and help farmers if they're already not part of an organization, either to develop a cooperative or an organization, and pool their resources, pool their bargaining power, and pool their knowledge. But then also, as from a funding perspective, I think there is one of the things we heard quite a bit as we were developing the smallholder consensus from farm organizations themselves is the need for direct financing of farmer organizations so that they can build their own capacity, that they can serve their members better. And that kind of those kind of resources are very hard to come by. So really just investing very much in farmer organizations and their capacity would go a long way. Thanks.
Great. Enoch, I saw you unmuted yourself as well. So would you like to add anything?
Yeah, just maybe supporting the same trend here, that the world is so very good at quick reaction, knee-jerk. There's a crisis, let's establish another mission over there, another initiative. We forget all the things that we've done in the past. We announce initiatives, after 2 years, it's done, another crisis comes, and then we do another initiative. So really building upon what we have learned already. We have been here before, we are going to be here again in the future. So how do we build that long-term resilient system, which is robust enough to withstand any other future, crisis? Because we know that these crises are inevitable. But food insecurity, extreme poverty, hunger, these things are solvable. We've realized that the countries that have been very much focused on the long-term agricultural development, which is inclusive and country-led, even in the middle of this current crisis, they are not as deeply affected as those countries that haven't been already focusing on their long-term development. Take, for example, Ethiopia has had 3 consecutive years of droughts and internal conflict. But if you look in the bigger scheme of things, they have certain systems that are working. They adopted 5 years ago a soil information system, just mapping the whole country. They know exactly what is the physics and the chemistry of their soil. They came up with their own 6 fertilizer blending facilities and making sure that not only the amount of fertilizer, but it is also the use efficiency of that fertilizer. So they've done that. They're also focusing on the nationwide extension system using digital. And they're digitizing, the whole country, and then coming up with a public, type of extension system that is reaching. As you know, Ethiopia has the highest number of extension officers. Their extension worker to farmer ratio is the best in Africa. At one extension officer servicing 472 farmers. If you go to Nigeria, it is 1:10,000. Go to Tanzania, 1:3,000. So they've been working on this. They've got farmer training. So you find that when you develop your ag sector for the long haul, you are already building resilience for any other type of crisis. It could be political conflict. It could be a disease like COVID. It could be drought. It could be climate change. So I think what is missing is building upon what we've already learned. Asma talked about the Series 2030. It's a blueprint. It tells you exactly what's needed, what the donors must do, what private sector must do, what the government must do. But in times of crisis, we abandon that. We pick up something else. You go to Africa, they have the CADEP framework, which is their own blueprint of what agricultural transformation should be on the continent. They're talking about 10% of their national budget towards agriculture. Now it's time to implement those things. And I think we need to emphasize on we have the tools. We are not searching for new tools. Let's work with what we have. Let's go to implement them seriously and then measure progress as we go.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, that's such a wonderful way to end this panel discussion. I would dearly love to continue, but unfortunately we're running out of time, so we need to wrap up. But I think it's a great point to emphasize, I think, that we already have the tools, we know what to do, we just need to get it done. And the fact that resilient, inclusive agricultural development is in itself a great, a tool to blunt other shocks and threats and risks that we will continue to face in the future. Again, thank you so much to our amazing panelists for their insights and how important it is to make sure that agricultural development is inclusive so that we can improve food and nutrition security for everybody. And also, of course, all of you have emphasized the need for partnerships, for collaboration, infrastructure, and investment as a way of building inclusive and sustainable food systems. Thank you also to our viewers who have engaged in this year's Global Food Security Symposium, and check out the Chicago Council's latest report, which actually explores what inclusive development can mean for agriculture. And this could range from working to embed flexibility and trust in programs to changing how agricultural research is conducted. So we hope that you will continue to engage with the Chicago Council on Global Affairs and the Center for Global Food and Agriculture. It's been my pleasure to moderate this panel discussion today. Thank you and goodbye.